Okay, welcome everyone. So just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded for the many, many people who will be watching this in the recording as well. I am very excited to welcome Dr. Jen Esker, otherwise known as Doc Jen Fit. She's a world-renowned physical therapist who's made an incredible impact on her community and brought physical therapy concepts and ideas into the mainstream for nearly 700,000 followers on Instagram, her many podcast subscribers, and her loyal Jen.health user base. Jen is an incredible exemplar for our profession, and after this webinar, I suspect she'll be an inspiration to the many residents and residency graduates who will hear her story. Jen is somebody who has leveraged her expertise to gain control over her time, her earning potential, and her passion, and has built a remarkable personal brand that we can all learn from. Jen, welcome to Residency Hot Topics.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we will jump right into it, and would love to start with your PT origin story. So first question is the easy one. Why did you decide on PT as a profession?
I mean, honestly, it was kind of the only thing that piqued my interest. I mean, I will say coming out of high school, it was just like, okay, well, I'm only interested in kind of like anatomy and the body. I was teaching Pilates and coaching gymnastics. So that was the only thing. Kinesiology was the only thing that interested me. And then getting into kinesiology, it was like, well, what am I going to use kinesiology for? And though I'm not a huge school person, so the thought of going to more school didn't excite me. I just knew that, especially after shadowing and being an aide within a physical therapy clinic, I loved the idea of helping someone along their journey. And I loved watching PTs feel movement and watch movement. And I'm always like, what are they looking at? And what are they feeling for? And, you know, teaching Pilates was cool, but like, why am I modifying around injury? And I can tape an ankle for gymnastics, but what is this doing and is it helping? So I just continue to have more questions about the body that led me down the like, okay, physical therapy is probably going to be the right path for me then.
Fantastic. And were there key people in your life that influenced that sort of journey, that path into physical therapy school?
Um, you know, I guess it would be the people that I worked with when I was an aide, when I was a physical therapy aide, and seeing how the clinic was run. There were some physical therapists that really inspired me. And there were others that I said, okay, that is not how I'll practice, and that's not how I'll be. And so, really getting to see kind of the dichotomy between the two types of therapists and who I wanted to exemplify as I was getting into the profession, that kind of really inspired me.
That's great. And so let's move one step further down the journey. So you're at school now and going through school and approaching graduation. How did your perspective on the profession and your place in it change from, kind of, hey, I'd love to go into PT school to, okay, now I'm going through it. What did you notice? What did you observe? Did that change as you went through school?
Definitely. Going into physical therapy school, at the time, when it was called women's health, I was like, oh, I'm going to go do women's health and I'm going to be a Pilates rehab person. And then getting into it, it was just understanding a little bit more of like, oh, that's probably a slower pace. That might not be, I don't want to just pigeonhole myself and just work in that population. Maybe that's not what I want to do. And then, in my last year of physical therapy school, that's when I met a chiropractor actually. And she was working on my boyfriend at the time at his home with her table and her tools. And she basically what looked like a physical therapy session and then did movement with him. And I thought, how are you doing that? Like you're setting up your own time, you're setting up your own stuff. And so that really kind of inspired me to say, well, what else is possible within what we do for physical therapy? And is it only under the structure of, the hospital, the skilled nursing facility, home health, and our clinic, or are there other possibilities of what we can do? And she kind of, a chiropractor, actually opened my eyes to the possibility that there's more out there, especially since we had direct access now.
Wow. And so how did you start your career? Did you start out immediately into a cash-based practice, or did you have other steps before that?
No, well, at the time I was going down to Santa Monica a lot. I didn't actually live in LA, but I was going down to Santa Monica because I met a community of acro yoga people that I fell in love with. And so I kind of knew that I wanted to work around that area. So I found a clinic that I wanted to work at that I was promised mentoring, because unfortunately we come out of physical therapy school and still feel like I don't know enough and I need to know more. And, how can I really help people? And so I wanted to make sure I was at a clinic, and I could get that mentorship along the way. But at the same time, when I was in my last semester, I purchased a treatment table. And so after, I don't think it was right away, but pretty soon into it, I went to a local CrossFit that I knew the manager through a friend and asked if they had a physical therapist that worked there. And they said no. And so I said, well, I get off early on a couple days a week. I can come on a weekend. What if I just set up my table and, saw people if they needed it? And so I just started dabbling that way. And that's kind of how I started my cash-based business alongside working full time and posting on social media. And I don't know how I was doing it all at the time, but I was.
Well, now you've added kids to the mix, so you've just added more and more on top of it for sure.
Yeah.
Now, so as you started your career and you'd done the full-time role and then you picked up the side hustle on top of that, were there observations, were there experiences, were there things that you saw in the field where you thought, hey, there are some flaws here that I think I can help to solve?
Well, I think even being in PT school and seeing the chiropractor and seeing a different way of being able to treat someone, that was something that we didn't learn in school. I remember sitting in our business class, and I call it a business class because it's not really that for physical therapy. And we had, different clinicians come and talk about opening practices and what that meant and how hard it is and how you can't have a relationship if you're going to open a practice. And it was just a lot of like dooms is what I felt like. And I remember sitting in that class and asking, oh, I met a chiropractor. This is what she does. She creates her own schedule. She goes to her clients and she's cash based. And now that we have direct access, is that something, you think we'd be able to do? And they said, no. And I'm like, you're telling a group of 65 people right now, that's not possible, but it is, and so I immediately started to think, well, what else is possible? And social media for me wasn't something I initially wanted to do. It just kind of started to grow when I was in physical therapy school by getting involved with the calisthenic community and the acro yoga community, and I started getting followers. And so from that, I started to connect with a lot of therapists who were doing things different. Some were teaching for rock tape and going around and actually hosting workshops and working cash based. And so I got to meet people who were doing things differently. And I really appreciated that about social media. I sought out people who I feel like I loved their mindset. I loved how they were treating the whole person rather than just body parts. And I started to connect with them. And they really helped to bring this insight of like, there is so much more that we could do. Kelly Starrett was a huge influence in that for, there's more that can be done with outside of the box that physical therapy typically puts you in.
Yeah, and Kelly was one of our webinar guests a couple of webinars ago.
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit. You opened up I think for some therapists at least, a very scary concept, and that the idea of putting yourself out there, especially on social media, networking, building content, stuff like that. So let's start with maybe the first step, but I'll take your guidance on this. How did you identify your community, your sub community that you wanted to serve? Like, what did you observe that you were like, gosh, was it just these people are awesome and athletic, and this is the calisthenics and acro community, or how did you find that? How did you find that community? Let's start there.
I would say they found me. It was at the time when I started Instagram, my handle was Jen_ES_care, because that's how you phonetically said my name. And I set it up for friends and family, and like, that's it. And then when I started posting calisthenic stuff and one of the big pages found me, I was like, oh my goodness, like how cool. And he invited me to Venice Beach to work out with everyone. And at the time, this was, gosh, I don't even know how long ago anymore. 10 years ago? Well, has it been that long? He invited me down to the beach, and there were not many women who were doing calisthenics. Now there's women who would blow me out of the water. But at the time, there weren't a ton. So he was posting, and then naturally, that's how I started getting followers. Then I stumbled into this acro yoga community, and I started naturally getting more followers. And I was just, it was a fun hobby to do on the side of physical therapy school. People are studying all weekend, and I'm like, I'm going down to Venice Beach and I'm going to go play. So it became just this side passion, fun thing for me to explore my body, meet other movers, see what other people were doing. And then once I graduated, I just felt like, I want people to know that I I'm have studied a ton and I'm learning a lot more, and I know a bit more about the body than just what I can do with my body. So I want people to see, you know, I have a bit more education. And so I changed my handle to Doc Gen Fit. And at the time I met someone named Vinny Rehab, who was very big in the Instagram world for physical therapy. He was from Canada, opened up what's called Myo Detox, and he really kind of took me under his wing and inspired me to just start putting things out there. And I was very scared. A new grad, I'm like, what do I know? What am I going to share that people are actually going to care about? And I had to make up my mind in that moment that whatever I say right now can change, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
this is what I know to be true right now. And it's scary because there's people out there that I'm following who I admire, who are much smarter than me, who are mentors of mine, and yet I'm going to start putting stuff out and just see what happens. And once that started happening, I started growing way more than what was initially just for fun and exercise related stuff. And I started with like kind of a yoga base of like, okay, stretching and movement and all that, since I was kind of in that acro yoga community. But then it just started to expand to what people were asking for. And I created content based on what people asked. There was an aide who worked at my clinic who would shoot some videos after work for me, and I gave her free clothes that I would get. And so we had this like cool relationship where that's how I could kind of get content at the side of working. And it just became something fun. I didn't have any intention. I didn't have any way of collecting emails. I wasn't creating a program. I wasn't doing it. I was never business mindseted in this way. I was
Hmm.
just doing it for fun and because this is what people were asking for. And if people are going to be there and asking, then I want to be able to provide. And that's really how it started.
That's great. And do you feel like finding the community was the first step for you? Or do you feel like thinking through content was the first step for you, or some alternative?
I mean, community is what showed up. And so it was like in that very beginning stage when I was invited to the calisthenic community and they started posting me that I said, oh, I guess I just do handstands on my page now. I don't know what to do now. So I started creating content based on who was coming to me and what people were wanting to see. And then once I switched over to Doc Gen Fit and I started educating a little bit more, it was just based on, well, what are people asking? And so
Hmm.
it was always, always, always community based.
Love it. Love it. So that was one of my questions was, did you see problems in your community? And in this case, in the calisthenics community or the acro yoga community that were not being met by traditional medicine? And I suppose you did, but I'd love for you to expand on that a little.
I think it was more so what I saw within the clinic, honestly, and people coming in and having to treat under the guides of insurance and what we can really say and how much we can really help people and what they're really being billed and how much they can really afford in co-payments. And so I was just really seeing a need of like doing more than just getting patients in and out the door.
Hmm.
And that's really where I wanted to help beyond just being confined to the clinic and using these tools that I don't always agree with and passive treatments that I'm like, but what is that really doing? And so there was so much more that I wanted to continue to expand upon that I was seeing actually come into the clinic. And some of that was from being on social media and people coming in and specifically asking to work with me. And it was in that moment too where I realized, I can always come back and get a job. Luckily, I have a career. I got a doctorate degree, so I can come back if I need to. But if people are coming in and asking for me, I don't see that many. That's
Yeah.
going to the clinic. So what if I just started to expand a little bit more? What if I started to take more of a leap of faith and just get out and do my own thing? And I did have to prove to myself that that was the method that worked. So I wasn't a person who was just like, quit the job, go and explore. I made sure that I could build up my clientele first. I made sure that it worked. I made sure that I had a system that I can handle. And then I left the clinic.
It's amazing too to think that the calisthenics community at the time was probably somewhat small. It's certainly grown dramatically since then. The acro yoga, I had imagined that's a fairly small community as well. But just having even those subsets of communities sounds like that sustained you in the initial phase as you kind of launched yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and I was working at the CrossFit, so it was also the CrossFit community that I was seeing a lot of people who were getting injured and
Yeah.
being able to help them through their journey so they can get back to doing what they love.
Love it. So one of our sports residency faculty members, his name is Phil Forsyth, reaches out. He says, if you could go back in time, do you think you would start with a more business specific intention with your content? Or do you think the process of creating content for yourself and fun was important for the journey?
I really think it was important. I don't think I'd be where I am today had I not focused purely on building community rather than trying to build a business first. And I think that's where people get it wrong. Oh, I'm going to create an Instagram and I'm going to have this big business and I'm going to do all this stuff. Well, that comes in time. I didn't sell my first product until 2 years into educating when I was solely Doc Gen Fit. So for 2 years, I was giving free content about the body. And I had people saying, I want to give you money just because, once I came out with my product, I want to buy it just because you've been doing this for so long. So, I really think you have to get to know the person and the people that you're serving. I mean, it's the same way of in person. We don't just open a business just to open. It's like, well, who am I serving and how am I serving people?
Well, it's something that Kelly brought up in his and Drew Contreras at the same time. They were saying, if you don't build trust, like if you don't sweat with them, if you don't work out with them, if you're not part of that, if you're not really part of that community, they won't trust you right off the bat. So to
Yeah.
be successful, I think you're right. Community certainly comes first. It's great. Next question. The At what point did you decide to pull the trigger on the um, additional services that you've built since switching over to DocGen Fit? So tell us a little bit about that story from posting fun content to, okay, now I'm going to educate to let me build a product. So how did that start?
Oh boy. Well, switching to Doc Gen Fit was really just came out of me graduating PT school and wanting people to know that I know a little bit more about the body than just what I can do with my body. So that's really why I wanted to switch to that. And I was encouraged just by my community of peers who were inspiring me and motivating me to post more educational stuff. I was very scared to do that and to step into that space. But once I did, I saw the desire for it to come more. And so I just continued to lean in. Um, and then, it wasn't until I met a lot of online marketers and I dated an online marketer where I really uh, discovered there's more that I could do than just posting on social media. And this is at the time social media starting to change. I'm like, who's even seeing my posts? And are things are people getting help? And if you see one post, what's that going to do? And so there's just like, well, what if I put it in one place? And I knew the content that people wanted to see because it was always the post that did the best. um, and it was mobility. And maybe that's because at the time there weren't a lot of people who were posting about mobility type stuff in the beginning of this Instagram journey. And so I polled my audience, I asked them questions, I sent out surveys, and I asked people, what is it that if I were to create something for you, I already knew what it was, but I asked, what was it that it would be? And everyone said mobility. And so I said, okay. And so I shot a mobility program with one of the acro people, actually, who was a videographer, and put a program together, read a book called Launch that I was
Great
I
book.
was told to
Yeah,
read.
great book. Yeah.
And I was also at a conference where I was listening to Jesse Itzler, and he kind of his whole journey is kind of just like been give it a go and apologize later, or ask for what you want and just see what happens. And so at the time I kind of knew Lori Harder. She was on the online marketing space, and I just asked her, like, she was in the fitness world, so that'd be very similar to what I'm doing. I text her and said, hey, any chance I'd be able to buy you lunch and sit down and just pick your brain on stuff? And she did. She sat down with me for like 4 hours and gave me her strategy. And I was able to kind of copy that, create an email list from launching a free course, and then launch into my product. And that did way better than what I was making in the clinic. And I was like, oh wow, this is wild. And so it was that kind of initiated the journey of, there's a lot more that's possible, and there's a lot more reach that's possible in this online space.
And that first mobility product, was that on Gen.Health? Is that where you have it?
No, that was on Thinkific. So, because at the time, Gen.Health is a completely built from our own developers. So that didn't come for many years after, but
All right.
I
Sounds like
used
we'll get there.
Thinkific. Yeah, I used
Okay.
Thinkific, which is, Kajabi, Thinkific, Teachable. They're all very similar. I recommend people getting started if they're going to launch a course on one of those sites. It's so easy to plug and play and put things in. And that's where I launched my first product called the Mobility Method, and then launched a membership after that.
That's amazing. And did you use your follower base to get the word out about the free course? Is that how you did it? Or did you go a different route for the marketing side?
I used everything. I used everything within my whatever I had available, which was a lot of community people as well. So people who Vinny Rehab put the link to my course in his bio at the time. I mean, I had Move You, that's a very popular chiropractic one at the time. They were supporting as well. So I had people, physical therapists, chiropractors within our community who were posting about my free product, and I just put a list of people together, of people I knew, and I said, hey, let me just ask. And I was still in that Jesse Itzler mindset of, let me just ask. If people say no, cool, that's totally fine. But let me just see what's possible. And so that's when I just would ask, and I still get, physical therapists and people reaching out to ask me because they've heard my story as well. And if I can support, I'm open to supporting. I can't support everyone, but and also early on in my journey, I would meet for people for lunch. Like, let's sit down and lunch. Let's have a call. I want to help other people the way that people helped me as well.
Wow. The power of community coming back again. That's amazing.
Yeah.
We got another question that came through in the chat here. I think resonating with the comment you made earlier about PT school not really teaching much in business class. So if you could go back in time now and recommend some edits to the curriculum in that business course, what would you recommend? That's the question you got.
I think we need to be able to explore all avenues of what's possible as a physical therapist. And with cash-based being so popular nowadays, I think that's something that should be talked about in school, and hopefully is. Obviously, I don't know. And then also, like, having someone in to talk about what is possible in the online space and what that looks like as physical therapist, because obviously you're not calling it physical therapy unless you're treating one-on-one within your state or whatever state you're licensed in. But you know, talking about all those nuances and those possibilities and what it really takes and the journeys to get there, rather than just like, it's so hard to open a clinic and you can't have a life if you're going to do that. And there was no practical tools that I learned within our business course. And I think there needs to be a little bit more practicality of what that looks like, what the process is, what are the steps. Go in groups and build your own business, and what does that look like, and what are you guys doing, and who are you serving? And I think there's a lot of change that could have happened within my that, and maybe that was just my PT class, but
Well, it sounds like you're setting yourself up for a yet another potential revenue stream, consulting with PT curriculums.
we'll see.
All right, love it. That's amazing. So I love this question. This is a really good one that someone posed before the webinar. Um, were you afraid at any point in this process to go the non-traditional route? Like, and if you were afraid, how did you overcome that fear?
Every day. Still. I have imposter syndrome every day. Um, you just do. Okay, so something else I was doing when I launched my product is I did a personal development course, because I have always deemed myself a very shy person, and most people would not think that at all looking at me today. But I've always grown up like, I'm not the people think I'm a B word because I'm in the back observing. I'm not up and speaking, and it's because I wait for someone to come to me before I start speaking. And I have always just been very shy. And so I did a personal development course that really got me outside of my discomfort and and to be able to step out and talk about a product I was proud of. Like when I launched the mobility method, I was doing 3 lives a day and I was really pushing it. And I was like in the mindset of like, I don't care if this annoys people. I know it can help people. So I'm just going to keep talking about it. And
Yeah.
that's something you have to do. You have to be so passionate about what it is you're going to do if you're going to start a business and how it's going to be, and talk to everyone about it and be unapologetic. And that's kind of the person I stepped into. And when social media, especially when I first started getting followers, again, super shy person, I only started doing what my body could do because I didn't want people to see who I really was. It was like, look at this
Mm.
cool acro yoga thing. Look at this cool thing I can do with my body, but don't really see who I am or anything like that. So I had a lot of insecurities. I had a lot of stuff. And it took a long time to be able to speak on social media. It took a long time to be able to speak on podcasts. It took a long time to feel comfortable doing what I'm doing now. And it's a complete 180 from where I started.
That's amazing. And so when you sought out that personal development course, where did you go find it? How did you do that? Because I would imagine that sentiment is shared by some of the people who are listening now or who will be on the recording.
So my boyfriend at the time actually pushed a personal development program, and I was very much in the mindset of like, I don't need this. I had a great childhood. I had great parents. I feel very fulfilled. So I was very, very resistant. And I went into the first workshop one weekend, and I was confirmed that these people are crazy and I don't need this. And it wasn't until I had another friend go through a San Diego version, which is very similar, but it had different leaders, where I felt it was less cultish. And
Yeah.
she was very closed off, like I was. And to see her transformation and her opening, she was very closed off. So to see her open and transform in ways, I was like, okay, let me just see what I'm not open to. And so I went the San Diego route, and kind of followed in her first footsteps. And I got a lot of friends to join after me, because all of a sudden they see this person who is shy to this person who's now out and talking and selling. Like that would never be something I would do.
Yeah.
Um, so it gave me a lot of confidence and self-worth in who I am and who I get to choose to be every day. That it worked. I mean, I think you have to find a place that feels comfortable for you. Don't fall into the culture so much that you become part of the cult. Take the tools and use them in the world.
Yeah,
And that's what I did, and that's what I am doing. And so I
that's
think
amazing.
you have to be careful where you get into.
Yeah, I think a lot of PTs that I've encountered at least think you've either got it or you don't. You're either, a business person or you're not. You're either a, cash-based provider or you're not. And it's neat to hear that with some targeted sort of training, you can change that mindset. You can change that
Mhm.
sort of perspective of yourself and really be successful. So amazing. Um, so next question is, now let's say, so you've gotten to your first product launch, it was successful, the mobility thing was taking off. What happened next? How did the next phase of your career evolve, and what were kind of the formative people or moments or experiences that led you down that path?
Well, at the clinic that I was working at, I just started to get more opportunities outside of physical therapy. I was asked to come and uh, be on a magazine cover and to do all this different stuff. And so I thought in the moment, what if it happened to be on a Saturday? But in my head, I said, what if this was on a week and I couldn't do it because I have my job?
Right.
Um, and that's when I just said, you know what? I After that shoot, I text my bosses and I said, we need to talk. And I immediately got a text back from one of them, please don't leave. And I just decided, it's my time. It's my time to take a leap. I've been treating people on the side. I know that it can work. I know that I can do my thing. And at the same time, I had another girlfriend who had just taken a job as a personal trainer at a gym that had space for me to bring my table. And she said, you can work here. And so I said, okay, great. This is what's going to happen. And so I started a cash-based business. And then that's when I launched the mobility method, probably about 8 months later. And I realized as I was trying to learn this online space and had no idea what I was doing, I really needed to take a step back from treating all the time. I was treating like 5, 6 days a week. Sometimes you burn yourself out when you're just doing it on your own. And so I really had to start taking steps back. So it went down to like 4 days a week, and then it went down to 3 days a week. And I just started to really lean into what I was doing online. And because I was like a entrepreneur, I didn't really have the availability to be able to do both, to be available full time in person and available full time online. And so I really had to start taking steps back until I went down to like about 2 days a week. And then I was treating still 2 days a week in person, and then also just focusing a lot online and seeing what I needed to do there, because again, I needed to learn everything.
Right. And so at that point, you had the mobility method. Were there other products that you were developing or other services you had kind of started working on by then?
Yeah, about 3 months later, actually, I launched a membership. So on Thinkific still, I launched what was called the Optimal Body membership, and that was great. I would release things every month and kind of continue to have an open membership like that. And then that's when, gosh, it wasn't until COVID. So I had just met my husband, who's also a physical therapist, prior to COVID. We met in 2019, and he was in Minnesota at the time. I was in California. He eventually moved down to California, and he was starting to build his own business and do his own thing. And then COVID hit, and he all of a sudden his in-person clientele obviously went to nothing.
Right.
And
Right.
so he was like, well, how can I help? What can I do? And I had like 300 unread emails and so much things in business that again, I love doing what I, what's out facing, what's forward facing, right? The marketing, the talking, the connecting to people. I am not good on what's happening in the back end.
Mm.
So I had zero organization. And so he stepped in and organized the crap out of everything. And we just started to work together. And then that's when we started the Optimal Body podcast together. And that's when he said, well, what if we had our own app and platform, and what would that look like? And we could hire on more people. And he really expanded the business of what I was doing that felt very small and content for me, into what it is today. And it wouldn't, I would say, would not be what it is today without his support.
Wow. And what is it today for those who aren't fully familiar with your sort of service line and product line? What are all the projects that you're working on now?
So really, we're focused on Gen Health. It's an app and a platform that we built with developers based on, it took a year, based on what people were asking for. So we interviewed like a ton of my community, anyone who would offer, people who were just following me, people who had taken a product and come out of a product, people who never wanted to purchase a product. So we kind of interviewed everyone that we could to see what they were really wanting, what they were really needing, what kind of platform they would want, what would make what we had before 10 times better. And I feel like we're still barely scratching the surface, but it's been out for 2 years now, and I'm very proud of it. And we're continuing to expand upon what that looks like and how we can really help people in a different way to be able to get to know their bodies.
That's amazing. And so how do you divide your day and your week and life up to manage all this stuff? Like, what does the work-life balance look like at this point?
So again, I still do a lot of the forward-facing stuff, the marketing. That I run my own Instagram. I don't have anyone else do that for me because I'm so passionate about who I'm connecting with and who I'm helping. So I want to know who those people are. So I love doing it. And then also we have YouTube now. So I create YouTubes. We have our podcast together. We create our podcast together. Um, and so we have days of the week that we have to shoot and that we have confirmed childcare. And then we have other days of the week where he's working on more of the back end finance and business and organizational stuff. And I'm working more on the front end on marketing and still getting to know who people are.
So it's a team of two.
Well, for at the head.
Okay.
And then
I'm
we
about to
have
say
other
that's a
people
lot of
helping.
projects for two people. That's amazing.
No. Yeah, we have other people, other team members helping now, which is great.
Awesome. So one of the questions I heard as people were prepping for this was the business knowledge, right? Like, we obviously, as you already alluded to a couple times, we've got the PT knowledge. So many people feel like imposters in the business world and are worried about that side. So I heard the personal development program, certainly a great partnership with another really capable person, helps a lot. Was there other business sort of stuff that you sought out or that you follow or that you found helpful for those listening?
Really just continuing to connect with other people who are doing similar things to me. So I will reach out, I will get lunch, I will get to know people, I will ask what they're doing, how they're doing it. Community is everything. And whether that's joining, some people like to join masterminds to help that and to really learn in the online space. And I think that's one way. I've heard so many mixed reviews on masterminds. It really, you have to be careful of which one you get into. Are they really going to help? Who are you meeting? So I personally haven't gone that route. I just haven't found the value yet in going in that route, but I have definitely surrounded myself with people who inspire me, who I can ask questions to, who I can get on the phone with and say, what are you doing? How are you doing that? What recommendations do you have for me? Again, I still go back to the book Launch, and who is that author again? Launch by Jeff Walker. Jeff Walker. And I still read that. I still recommend that to people. It was a good place to start, and it's something I still kind of utilize as a launch strategy. And I really lean on community. I think that's so huge, so important. You can't just kind of pigeonhole yourself. And I mean, you can, and you can try to do it all on your own. But especially for me, who I used to, going into PT school, I said, business, that's over my head. I will never open my own practice. I will never be doing business. And here I am. So, so it's possible. I mean, I think you have to surround yourself with people or put yourself in groups of people that are doing something that you want to be doing.
Brilliant. So I'm going to give everyone a little bit more time to ask their final questions, but I got a big one for you to talk through, Jen, while they do that. What are your big goals for the next phase of your life and career? Because obviously this you're still just getting started. You're still in the early phase of your own journey. So what's next for you, do you think?
I really have high hopes for where Gen Health as a platform can continue to grow into and potentially help other PTs by having a job opportunity and working with clients in different ways, or putting programs on a platform that they've never done before. So I want Gen Health to be so much more than just me. The reason it was called Gen Health is because it's a easy word, not because it's me, but it's like, oh, if you're in pain, try Jen. Have you tried Jen? Like that was the intention of calling it that, and I was encouraged by our consultants to call it that. I had a lot of hesitation, like, oh, that's a lot of pressure. That's my name, but at the same time, everything I do is my name. It's Doc Jen Fit. That's how people know me. So it is what it is. But I do have high hopes for it expanding and becoming so much bigger than what it is and so much bigger than me. But it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work. And I feel like we're still getting to the MVP of the product that allows people to flow into it a lot easier and seamlessly. We're still getting there.
That's exciting. I love it. So we got one more question that came through. What's your philosophy when it comes to handling things like negative comments, criticisms of you and your content?
Um, Luckily, to be honest, I don't get a ton, so I'm very grateful for that. And people who do come to me, I great, let's have a discussion. I take it outside of comments and I DM. And if people don't DM me back, well, then you don't really want to have a discussion. Like, cool. But I try to always have discussion. So let's like educate me. If I'm wrong on something, sure. Let's chat about it. Let's see what's why. And I also am super clear on who I'm talking to. And I think that is the scariest thing for physical therapists sometimes is that I am not talking to another clinician. So I might say something that triggers clinicians because I have to say it in a way that gets someone's attention. If this is where I have to meet people where they're at, if they think my pelvis is out of alignment, I have to say that. I have to draw them in somehow in order to guide them into what the research really says nowadays and where what we know. But I have to guide them and get them some way. And so I have triggered PTs in the way that I present my content, and then they go listen to a podcast and they're like, "Oh, I agree with you." And I'm like, "Okay, but you're not doing what I'm doing." And other PTs are talking to other PTs, and that is their clinician base, and they're reaching people in a different way than I am. And I have to be okay and so clear with who I'm reaching and how I'm reaching them, and know that I'm not for everyone, and I'm going to maybe make some therapists mad in the way that I do that, and that's okay. You're not my people. You're not who I'm trying to get on Gen Health.
Right.
So, I just I'm very clear, and I'm always open. I'm always open to discussion. But if it's in a rude or derogatory way, then I will shut it down.
Love it. Well, Jen, I know I can speak for all of the therapists, residents, residency grads, faculty members, and the many, many, many people who will be listening on the recording, um, that we're excited to have you on. I really appreciate your time. I reached out to you specifically because um, I had heard a little bit about your story, and I think it's just amazing to see that journey happen and all the insights and I think good and bad, the challenges and how you overcame them. That should be an inspiration to all of the therapists on this who are hoping to, at some point break free of the traditional model to move to that sort of next step to take that leap of faith. So thank you for being an exemplar. Thank you for changing the field, and for taking the time on the evening with us.
Thank you for having me on. Sometimes I'm like, who cares about my story? But if it can help inspire at least something, then I'm very grateful.
It very much has. Thanks again. Have a great evening. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.